Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Edgerly, for that very generous and detailed introduction. I actually forgot all those things that I did when I was a little bit younger, but it is a joy to be with you all. Jim, thank you for the invitation to come. Hang in there. You're doing fantastic work. This is a great gathering of supporters. I know they'll continue to support you because you're doing the right thing. And Charlie, dust it off, get up, run again. You're going to be a great governor. I know something about this because in 1994, in the last Republican wave election, I was one of the few people that lost. And it was disappointing, and it kind of pissed me off, to be honest with you. I'm sure you have the same feeling. Excuse, Aunt Nancy, sorry for the bad language. But I realized that it was a chance to challenge myself, to realize that you don't control everything in politics. The good Lord knows that. And to figure out if I wanted to do it again. I got involved in education reform, not as a candidate, but it was where my passions were. And it let me stay involved in a way that if I was going to run in 1998, I wouldn't have a Republican opponent, which is always nice, and it put me in a position perhaps where I could have a chance to win. So if that's what your dreams are, don't give up. It's the best damn job in the world. So good luck to you. Now, this is not a political gathering, so this is my last political statement. Sean, where's Sean Belat? Dust it off. The energy that so many new people that are concerned about the future of our country brought to this election, winning or losing, really, it doesn't really matter, is something that's sustainable. And I hope that you stay actively involved, Sean. You ran a great race. There were a lot of people in Florida cheering for you. I have to recognize my Aunt Nancy, or as she's better known in the Jeb Bush family, our favorite relative. Who is kind of our eyes and ears in what goes on here behind enemy lines in Massachusetts. Steadfast, loyal supporter of all things conservative and obviously of all things Bush. And can you imagine being the aunt of W, the sister of 41? Long, long years behind enemy lines, I promise you that. So it is, I love my Aunt Nancy. Everybody has spoken about Pete Peters, and I'll just say this. A man who has faith in his heart and has the Lord in his heart is going to go to heaven, and it's glorious up there. And he's watching down. So with that, everybody said what he's done on earth, but we should be celebrating life when people pass on, particularly when they're 97 years old, have made such a difference. I read a book when they kicked me out the door as governor, at the age of whatever it was, 54, something like that, 55, and it was called Halftime. It's a great book for those that are moving to another life. I believe that Jim Blanchard wrote it, I think his name was. And it's a book about how you can live a more fulfilled life after your first halftime. And if you pause a little bit and reflect on what you want to do, you can make a huge difference. You can add value to the lives, your own lives, your family's lives, and your community. And I think Pete Peters maybe did that at halftime, then he did it in overtime, and he's probably doing it upstairs right now. It's like a full-time endeavor. So I am honored to be here to be the speaker about the power of ideas if you execute on them the right way. And by the way, $975, Mr. Edgerly, is a whole lot of money in 1964. So on behalf of all the Bushes, thank you for allowing Mr. Peters to be so generous with his fundraising. 975, probably in 10 years' time, with the inflation, sadly, Jim, we're going to have with the quantitative easing policy and the fiscal policy of our country, will look like a really good bargain by then. So as a candidate for governor in 1997, after I dusted myself off and realized that I wanted to pursue this chance to serve as governor, and I decided I was going to go visit 100 schools. I loved it. It was the coolest thing I could ever imagine doing. I started in the fall, and I got through 100 way too quick, so I decided I was going to go visit 200 schools. That went through pretty quick, and I ended up, before we got to the general election, visiting 250 schools, and the campaign said, "Stop this, this is crazy. You're not actually campaigning, you're actually just going to schools." Which showed you where my passions were for the campaign, because I wanted to get a sense of the nuance, the language, how people perceived reform, where were the threats, why did people sense that we couldn't do it better? Because public education in America today is very insular, it's a monopoly. And so it's geared to protect the adults at the system. It's not that they don't have the right motives for kids. Most teachers in the classroom are there because they love children and they want to do what's best. But around that classroom are all sorts of institutional forces that refuse to change. They're threatened by change. They haven't seen what the lush green valley on the other side of that rocky climb that politicians ask people inside the education system to do. And so if you go visit 250 schools in any state, you begin to see the magic of the work of great teachers in the classroom, but you also see kind of this institutionalized protection of a system at the expense of children. I saw kids that had learning disabilities that were labeled learning disabled so that there could be higher monies in terms of the funding formula that would come to the district. It's not that they got better service, it's not that they got better quality education, but the game was to create more learning disabled kids so that you could get more money for your school district to be able to provide more money for the adults. I saw firsthand what my brother called the soft bigotry of low expectations. It is a subtle thing, but it is so dangerous for a country that aspires to be an opportunity society to say, "Juanito no se puede," because he comes from another country, so therefore we have to lower the expectations of the newly arrived. Or an African-American kid can't achieve great things because of life circumstances, or a kid that lives in poverty can't be successful, so let's just do the easy thing and lower expectations for them because they can't make it. And the net result is, as you lower the bar, and that's what's happened, as Mr. Peters probably would have said, for the last 50 years, we've lowered the bar and we've gotten the result of what we've aspired to. So the 250 visits forced me, really, to be big and provocative as I could get my advisors to allow me to be, and bold in my campaign, so I would have a chance, if I was elected, to be able to act on these beliefs. And I learned a lot along the way, not just as a candidate, but in those first years of governor, that you can move the needle, which is why the Pioneer Institute has a huge role going forward in this state, and it can inspire other like-minded think tanks around the country to provide the ammunition, if you will, for those big ideas, to encourage the leaders that will emerge from every state to be able to challenge the adults in the system to focus, to move the system to a child-centered system. So I believe there are 4 things that need to be done. Variations of this exist all across the country, but implemented in a comprehensive way. Florida, and in a certain extent Massachusetts, has proven if you have comprehensive reform in your heart and you have the tenacity to execute properly, you can move the needle. You can move student achievement. And it's based on higher standards, which Massachusetts leads the way on thanks to the work of this great institute. Robust accountability, where maybe Florida is perhaps the beacon for other states to follow, where you have an "I'm not kidding" expectation, a high expectation, and there's consequences of rewards when you do things right, and penalties, if you will, if things don't work out. Rewarding teacher effectiveness, which is the huge battle taking place all across the country today, where we challenge this collective bargaining process so that we can break it up and reward great teachers for the work that they do, and have a different consequence for mediocrity, where we help them get better, and for poor teachers, we fire them and get them out of the classroom as quick as possible so our children don't suffer. And then finally, an embrace of parental choice where we empower parents to be actively involved in their children's education with a particular emphasis, I believe, going forward in the 21st century on digital learning. First, we need to set high expectations for all students. Sadly, in America today, Massachusetts is slightly ahead of the rest of the country. 1/3 of our children graduate from high school career and college ready. The greatest country on the face of the earth has that result. 1/3 of our children get to 12th grade, if they can make it to 12th grade, college and career ready. 1/3 get a high school diploma that makes them feel good, I guess, but they can't go to college. They can't go to a community college or university because they have to take remedial courses in order to start taking college courses. And 1/3 in America, 1/3 of our students don't graduate from high school at all. Look at the income levels between different levels of education outcomes, and you can see how increasingly those results will yield unfulfilled dreams for 2/3 of the next generations, which makes it impossible for us to sustain our own quality of life. So it seems to me the first thing that we need to do is to raise the bar, because I don't think the problem is that 2/3 of our students are failing to learn because school is too hard. In fact, it may sound counterintuitive, but 2/3 of our kids are failing to learn because it is the exact opposite. We're not challenging our children from the earliest grades all the way through. And so we need to raise the bar up. This is not a conversation particularly for Massachusetts because you've already done that. And you've seen the explosion of student achievement because you have. It is the first step for school reform to have the courage to say, here is our expectations of greatness for our children. God gave children the ability to learn. It's up to us as adults to organize ourselves around them to assure that that God-given talent takes place. We will get exactly what our expectations are. It has been proven over and over and over again. Less than half the states in the United States require a math course beyond Algebra 1 for a high school graduation. Just 14 states require biology. So look over the horizon, as Pete Peters did at the age of 77, 87, 97, looked way over the horizon. Imagine what the world looks like when we are graduating children that cannot comprehend the most important elements for a successful life, which are the higher order math and science. But that's what the expectations are across the country. It seems to me it is unfathomable that we don't require greater math and science at every level of school. The result is that low expectations is applied for all but the most motivated students, or maybe, and frankly, maybe just the motivated parents that force students to achieve these things, and yet we set aside those expectations for all sorts of families. For whatever life circumstances are, their children are not motivated to learn. In fact, 72% of affluent students take math beyond Algebra 2, but only 33% of students from low-income families take that course. That is the soft bigotry of low expectations. That is having one bar for one group of kids and another bar for another. And so across the board in every state, we need to raise the bar. I know that the Pioneer Institute has some issues with the Common Core standards. I like Common Core standards because they are higher than Florida's. I am shamelessly in love with my state. I will support anything that raises the bar for 50 or 48 or 45 states, and that should be not the ceiling, but that should be the baseline from which we operate. And if Massachusetts wants to dream to bigger standards because they think that they can push their students higher, then so be it, and that's the way it should be. Our federalist system works that way, and so the first element is high expectations. Strong standards establish the foundation. Next comes accountability. That is the area where, as I said, I think Florida has something to offer the rest of the country. Back in 1998, Florida ranked at the bottom in nearly every indicator of student outcomes. We were 29th out of 31 in the 4th grade NAEP. In 1998, leading many, not myself of course, because I'm a huge fan of these following states, but many to secretly say, thank God for Mississippi and Louisiana. Florida ranked at we had the lowest graduation rate. We couldn't say thank God to anybody because we were 50th of the 50 states in the graduation rate. When we implemented our A-plus plan for education, it was based on the premise that all children can learn. Whatever your challenges, learning disabilities, poverty, language barriers, children can learn. No excuses. All kids can learn, period, exclamation point. It was the underwriting principle of our belief. And so if you believe that, then you have a system of accountability that says every child matters in the accountability system, and that's exactly what we did. We created schools A, B, C, D, and F, 100% based on student learning, half on proficiency, how students did to our standards, half on learning gains, with an emphasis on the bottom 25%. We weren't the first place to grade schools. In fact, in Florida, we were grading schools 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I have no clue whether 5 was bad or 5 was good. In some states, grade satisfactory, excellent, or poor. Satisfactory may be a B and maybe a C. I can guarantee you in Florida, though, when a school is graded C, no one's happy. It may be that a C is satisfactory. The total transparency changed people's attitudes about student learning. There were huge celebrations when students gained additional knowledge, and it was reflected in the school grade, where schools may have gone from a C to an A. They also received $100 per student directly into the school account. And when schools were graded F, 2 years out of 5, those parents were given vouchers to send their kids to a private option or a public option. And the very fact, you like vouchers? So do I. This accountability system dramatically changed learning in Florida. The whole focus became more student-centered. Every child mattered, and so the learning disabled kid could make a difference to be able to move a school from a B to an A. The Fancy Pants Elementary School in the suburban part of the state, if it had children in the bottom 25% that weren't learning, and it was to be penalized to go down to a B, they made sure that those kids, even though they were not a large number of people in the school, they got the attention they deserved. And the net result has been, because of this accountability, we have moved the needle in ways that are historic. So as I mentioned, the 4th grade reading, across the board, that has been the result. We've gone from the bottom to the front. Today, the graduation rate was announced in Florida for the 12th straight year. Florida's graduation rate has improved. It improved by 3% this year. African-American kids' graduation rate went up by 5% this year. Hispanic kids' graduation rates went up by 4% this year. We went from the bottom of the pack to today, our graduation rate is 78%. It's not good, but if you have a 50-year time frame like Pete Peters, it's starting to make a difference. And by the way, when you have a different consequence between abject failure and mediocrity and excellence, you begin to see that you have less failure, you have a focus on improvement, and you have a lot more excellence. It's human nature, it is common sense, and applied in public schools, it works even in a monopoly. This simple idea of robust accountability that's totally transparent has caught on. The first place where it took place outside of Florida is New York City, where the needle has been moved as well, particularly in the lower performing students. Florida's the largest state, the only large state that has had a narrowing of the achievement gap in the last 10 years because of this accountability. New York City as a city has had similar gains. Now Arizona, Louisiana, and Indiana are all beginning to grade schools. And my guess is in the next legislative session across the country, there'll be 5 to 10 other states that do the same. The second element of our accountability system was to say that in 4th grade, children begin to read to learn. Up till then, they're learning how to read. And it is tragic, it is morally wrong, and it is bad policy to allow a child who is in 3rd grade that is functionally illiterate to go to 4th grade. Because it is guaranteed, it is a lead pipe cinch that that child will then begin to be frustrated, and if you can't read and you're functionally illiterate, you're not going to be able to acquire knowledge, and that frustration yields these huge achievement gaps that create such social costs going forward for a generation at a time for our states. So in Florida, we decided to eliminate social promotion in 3rd grade. We said any below basic reader, any functionally illiterate reader which the year before we implemented this policy was 29% of third graders in Florida. So, and I was running for re-election, by the way, Charlie, so this was a slight risk. Theoretically, I guess 29%, nothing happened, 29% of the kids in third grade would be held back. A little bit of a logistical challenge for the principals in elementary schools. But we allowed some good faith exemptions, but minor ones, no Big Mac truck exemptions. We said this is not acceptable in the state of Florida. And in 2 years' time, the functional literacy rate among third graders went from 29% to 14%. We cut it in half. And 14% of students were held back in third grade. And it was traumatic, and it was tough. But we required that a different intervention take place for these kids. They were not going to be taught the same way they were taught the year before. So more creative interventions took place, and they were passed on, and now research shows that those kids that were held back traditionally over the last 6 or 7 years have caught up with those similar like-kind kids that went on to fourth grade and have exceeded them, and it was the right thing to do. And so accountability truly matters. You get the result that you aspire to if you execute properly. And Florida is a suggestion. Just as Massachusetts is the beacon for higher standards, I think Florida is certainly the beacon for accountability. And so the net result over this 10-year period is that African-American kids in Florida, if you count them as a state among fourth grade readers, they do better than 8 states average. Florida low-income Hispanic kids do better than the California average. Florida's Hispanic kids do better than 31 states in the country, and they're above the national average. Florida went from 29th out of 30 to 6th in the country out of 50. It works. So what I learned as we moved on this, and the fun part of being governor is that you create a set of reforms, you execute on it, people start saying the world hasn't come to an end. It allows you to then generate the next iteration of reform, and it becomes kind of fun and sustainable and wacky, and people, think the governor's a little crazy, but they expect the next provocative set of reforms. And so, apart from social promotion, we created a whole series of reforms to make sure that particularly kids of lower income were given access to higher quality. Because my goal in Florida was to create a huge crisis. The crisis was that we had so many qualified students, instead of dropping out, that were graduating college and career ready, that our higher education system wouldn't know what to do. That was the goal. And so we created the most ambitious AP program to make sure that in the urban core areas, AP classes were given to them. We created Florida Virtual School, which is the largest of its kind by far that implemented AP classes for rural schools as well as the urban core schools where teachers weren't available to be able to teach. And the third thing that we tried to do that is still work in progress, where I hope eventually Massachusetts will follow suit as well as the other states, is to focus on the simple fact that a quality teacher is the leading indicator of a successful education experience for children. Katie Haycock with the Education Trust found that students of the most effective teachers learn almost 4 times more than the students of the least effective teachers. And these effects can be seen for at least 3 years. Bill Sanders from the University of Tennessee, a renowned researcher, shows similar kind of results, but even more dramatic in terms of the effectiveness of a quality teacher compared to a teacher that doesn't know what they're doing. How 5th grade students, for example, in Tennessee who have an effective teacher, based on the Sanders research, shows that for 3 consecutive years they have 50 percentile points higher than students with an ineffective teacher. These are dramatic changes, and if you project it out over the life of a student's K-12 experience, you begin to see why we have these gaps and how they can be closed with effective teaching. So if we use that research as a basis for reform, we would make some pretty common sense changes. Unfortunately, common sense and politics don't always go hand in glove. Teachers would be evaluated and compensated on how much more their students learn, and teacher whose students learn more would earn more. I know that sounds like a radical idea, but that should be a fundamental principle of how we deal with teachers. To attract and reward individuals with skills in high-demand subjects where there are huge shortages across the country, like math and science, those teaching positions should be paid a lot more. To attract great teachers to our toughest challenges, teachers who work in high-poverty schools would earn more. That's our hope, our best hope, I think, to narrow and close the achievement gap. Finally, in this competitive global economy, no one should have a lifetime guarantee of employment, and that should include teachers. So here's how this works. The unions support the politicians that know this is wrong, but they put their faith and support for the adults rather than the kids, irrespective of the constituencies that are hurt by this. They know it is wrong, but they pander to the people that keep them in office, and in return, they won't challenge them. That's the tragedy of American politics today, and when politicians stand up to do what's right, everybody in this room should redouble their efforts to support them, because this has to be broken. We no longer can allow a collective bargaining process to reward longevity of service and suppress excellence in teaching as a means of compensation. And I hope that you will support people that have the courage to do that. Finally, if you have the vision of Mr. Peters, then you got to look over the horizon a little bit. And the horizon is incredibly bright with huge opportunities in education. The future has to be in customization, which is based on school choice, where we empower parents more, and an embrace of technology where it is at the core of what we do in education, not just a peripheral thing that's kind of gathering dust in the side of the classroom. We need to embrace the fundamental concept that education should be custom designed to maximize every child's God-given ability to learn. The simple fact is that children learn at different paces and in different ways. This is not a monolithic group of little widgets that come into classrooms. These are kids with incredibly different, diverse interests, abilities, ways to learn. And the only way that we can deal with this is to move away from the notion that we're living in Ozzie and Harriet land, or whatever, Ozzie and Harriet land, where every child is the same and every teacher has to teach the same way, and they're sitting in the classroom the same way they sat in the classroom 50 years ago. That can happen now through the embrace of technology, and we should give parents many more choices than this monolithic, monopolistic system of education that exists today. Parents should be able to give choices, and the very threat of choice, the chance of a parent to be given choices, improves all schools. Florida has the most extensive school choice programs in the country, and there's enough data through serious research. Paul Peterson, who's with us today, is living proof of this with his excellent research that shows that the threat of competition is like a catalytic converter to improve all schools. And so in Florida, you can call it, here in Massachusetts, when Governor Baker gets there, or others that believe in this stuff, you can call it a grant, you can call it a scholarship, you can call it a voucher. The simple fact is it's an act of empowerment for parents to be much more engaged in their children's education. So in Florida, we have the second highest number of charter schools, inspired by the work long before we began that process here in Massachusetts. We have the largest voucher program in the country, which is our universal pre-K program, with 144,000 children going to private options paid for by the state to prepare them with early literacy work to make sure that they're prepared to start kindergarten ready to learn. We have the largest voucher program with students for disabilities, called the McKay Scholarship Program, with about 30,000 kids. Any parent whose IEP, whose individual education plan, is not met based on the federal law can take that money and take their child to any school of their choice. The largest corporate tax scholarship program in the country, which will exceed 75,000 students. My guess is in the next 5 years, already has 30,000, is in Florida, the corporate tax scholarship of our state. And the research has shown that these programs pressure the public system to do better, and I can guarantee you the parents are exceedingly satisfied in these other options. It is a huge win-win, because it improves all schools when you do this, but it also empowers parents that otherwise would not have the power to be able to send their children to the school of their choice. Second, we should harness the power of technology, as I mentioned, to truly, radically transform education. As I said, we know how students, they learn differently. Every researcher from Harvard, where I'm hanging out for the last week, by the way, it's pretty cool to be a conservative at Harvard. I'm having a blast. It's a pretty good university you guys have up here, by the way. But most schools are teaching kids the exact same way that they taught them 50 years ago. This is one of the tragedies of American education, and think about the possibilities of harnessing technology as we've done in our personal lives and in our businesses, how it enhances productivity and the chance to be able to achieve big dreams. We have the ability to create the iTunes of the education world, where teachers can access rich and rigorous content from different sources, creating a learning experience that meets the individual needs of students. The potential of this system is truly endless. A classroom full of kids could all be learning at their own pace, spending more or less time on the materials based on their abilities. Exercises and homeworks could be customized to the student's interest. This is done each and every day in your homes for your children and grandchildren. It's called video games, by the way. The potential for learning, applying these things that are done in the entertainment industry and the training industry are here for already. It exists, and we have adaptive software using technology to make it even stronger and better. I'm not talking, by the way, of allowing children to stay at home while mom works. I'm talking about classroom education in a hybrid form where content comes from great places, where we learn from great teachers, where teachers then, in concert with these great teachers, logistically deal with the fact that children are learning at different paces, and it'll be a much more flourishing learning environment. This can be done on scale at a lower cost than what we're spending today. It just requires a pause, just as Pete Peters would have done and said, if we weren't doing it this way, how the heck would we be doing it? We would not be doing it the way that we're doing it today. And we as a nation need to pause as quick as possible and collectively say, it's time to try something different. It's time to customize the learning experience so that children that are capable of starting university as a sophomore, as I did, because I was focused on learning, should not be held back because they're in a classroom where they're teaching to the median. And kids that are not gaining the power of knowledge because they can't keep up, we focus on them in a different way so that they can learn. This can happen, and my belief is that this will be an explosion of learning, the likes of which we've never seen. I passionately believe if you had to pick the one thing in this country that truly matters for our long-term success as a nation, it is to radically change the course that we're on in public education. Imagine what it would be like. Imagine what it would be like if every child, or close to every child, gained a year's worth of knowledge in a year's time. Imagine what that would be like. And that happened the next year, and the year after, and the year after. Imagine the loss or the social costs that would begin to go away. Imagine that the demands on government right now that are cascading out in every federal, state, and local budget begin to subside because we have independent people living lives of purpose, capable of living lives that allow them to dream big dreams and have the tools to be able to make those dreams come true. For our country, the greatest country on the face of this earth, to maintain its prominence in the world, we better pause. We better challenge every basic assumption about how public education works, and we better have the courage to dramatically change it. And if we do, incredible things will continue to happen for our country. I'm inspired by the work of the Pioneer Institute because you guys truly were pioneers in this, and I hope that you inspire a lot of other public leaders along the way. Thank you. God bless.